All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's webinar from the ADI and JC training team. We've got James Quinn, Nick Ibbott, Neil Peake, and myself, Edward Marshall, on the panel tonight. So we're here tonight to talk about opportunities and qualities in a driving instructor and diversification into other areas and trying to expand your business, bring other revenue in. And we want you guys to join in as much as possible. Send us some questions. The question panel's open, and you can type into the question box on the control panel on the right-hand side and ask your questions in there. And we're going to start off tonight just by each of us going through some areas that we've sort of gone into and diversification we've gone into other than just learner drivers. So I'm just going to hand over to Neil Peake. And Neil, if you'd like to just introduce yourself and sort of say what diversification you've done.
Well, I do believe I've just about gone through every sort of diversification that you can do, which includes B plus E, Class C driver training, Class C plus E, which is Class 1. I have done instructor training, and as I said, you name it, I've just about done it.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Neil. Nick.
Over the years, I've always tried to improve my professionalism, if you like. I've done MVQ level 3, started off as an MVQ assessor. I've, like Neil Peake, I'm an ADI NJC tutor trainer and went through that course, which was quite rigorous in its day. Done Cardington a number of times to keep myself up to date. Done Sitting Guild 730. And with you guys, run check test coaching and standards check workshops, which we've been doing for a number of years, and belong to a lot of different organisations, such as the local St Albans and District Driving Instructors Association, which I've been the chairman and currently are, and heavily involved with ADI and JC, part moderniser driver training. And what I can say is, because of belonging to these various organisations, it does give a good spin-off and makes you a more rounded ADI, I believe, because as we all know, it's a very insular industry.
Yeah, and James, if you just give us a brief overview.
Some similar things to Nick, really. Gone into ADI training, both to become an ADI, but also check test and our standards check training. Offered fleet training. Also advertised things for full license holders. So rather than just in any advertising on the website, just aiming at learner drivers, offering things like refresher lessons, motorway lessons, lessons to prepare to become a taxi driver and take that test. In terms of my own development, again, I've been joined various organisations, done the diploma in driving instruction, became an advanced examiner, and really just attended as many workshops, events, and listened and learned, and just try to generally improve as much as I can.
Yeah, excellent. And myself, I've started off doing the diploma like you, James. I've done BTEC 4 in coaching for driver development. I've gone into ADI training myself, and B plus E is one of the biggest areas that I've gone into that I've found has been quite lucrative, because I'm one of the few trainers in our area that actually does B plus E. And I think for me, one of the things that I looked for when I was sort of looking to diversify into different areas is what sort of markets were going to be niche for in my area, and looking at how that was going to be. So what, on the panel, what drove you towards doing the other things? Was it looking for niche markets, or was it just to vary the sort of training days and not just concentrate on learners? Does any one of you want to take up the reason you actually looked for diversification?
I don't mind answering that one. I figured it out that being on my own and doing one thing and one thing only, I couldn't achieve the standard of living that I wanted. So therefore, I had to get other people involved in my business. And I went from 1 car to 30 cars in 2 years. And then expanded out either side into the LGV industry, as I've already said, plus all the other peripheral things that you do on the side. But it was this inner thing inside of me that made me want to say, hey, if you want a good standard of living, boy, you can't do it when you're on your own.
Yeah. Nick?
Yes, I think it is something within you that says, no, I've got to strive to be better or the best that I can be, and always expanding and improving your knowledge. So I too diversified into instructor training, which I've always found very lucrative as well. And of course, the more you do it, the more you realise that there are people out there that sadly get ripped off, if you like. They don't get good quality service, not just from just the L side. And I think people who are looking to go into diversifying and they need another qualification do need to find the right quality of trainer that's going to help them in that area.
Yeah. Nick? Sorry, James?
I think initially I was just trying to become a better instructor, learn more, improve myself, and so I could give a better service. And I think I then gradually worked out that there was a wider market than just learners, and just gradually saw different opportunities and basically went for them as and when I could.
Right. Lovely. Has any of you did you take on any extra training for, like, when you've gone into instructor training? Has anybody done audit?
Yeah, as part of audit registered for quite a number of years. There was a team of us that worked with that. One of those was John Nielsen and Margaret Stacey. We all ran audit along with John Milne and Jeffrey Milne and Simon Cairn. We were a team that was with all audit registered.
Yeah.
So yeah. And of course, we had a big hand, fun enough, in the starting of ADITE, as it was, and then what became audit. And through ADI&JC, we were major players in organising a lot of that, and trying to thump the table to say, let's make this mandatory. But as always, DVSA dragged the heels and try never to make anything mandatory. It's like the LGV register; that's still voluntary. That's correct, Neil, isn't it?
Yeah, I was in it for the first 5 years, and because it wasn't being made compulsory, I just came out of it. My LGV instructor now, he is in it, but I certainly wouldn't stay in it because of the principle of it. They just were not interested in making it compulsory.
I think, if I'm right in thinking, you have to re-qualify every 4 years, don't you, for that one, Neil?
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but again, it's a money-making thing for DVSA without any reason to be qualified. I know what Nick said earlier. Yes, that's his inner thing. Well, I'd done it to start with, but once I realised it, I said no, thank you.
I did very similar with the audit register. Actually, I did some training with Phil Hurst, which was near me, to go through the audit, because I just wanted to be sure myself that I was doing the correct things, and then just have somebody else look at me. But I stayed on it for, I think I did 3 terms, so that's 6 years in total. But then I came off it because I didn't see any value, and there was no added value for me remaining on it. So I think it's something that, if you're looking for diversification and you're looking to do that training, it's something to consider, is taking the extra training, but looking at the value of the extra things like audit or the LGV register, and how much is that going to add to your business.
Yeah, very little.
In some cases it is, yeah. So just on this screen here, just for those that are watching, this is some of the things that we've put on here to see if any of you are doing anything like this for the learner drivers. If you could maybe tell us what sort of industry you're in within the training areas. Are you doing fleet? Are we on learner drivers? What sort of people have we got on there tonight looking at these? So if you want any questions answering, type away in the questions, because we haven't had any questions come in just as yet. So,
can I just say something, Ed?
Yeah.
Ed, your sound quality is not coming through very well. I think you had this problem before. I don't know if the others can hear an echo.
Is there an echo off me?
Yeah.
Yeah, of you. Yeah, I can hear an echo. Only of your voice, not of the others.
Right. Okay. James, are you
Well,
hearing
it's
an echo?
distorted.
Yeah, Ed, there is a slight distortion on your voice over James, myself, and Neil. It's probably all the electronics around you, see?
It could be.
You can't take your finger out the socket.
Yeah. We'll press on then, and we'll see if anybody else. Oh, there's somebody with a hand up there. Nigel has a hand up. If Nigel, if you could just type into the question box what you've got your hand up for. If you're wanting to ask a question, you find the question box in the control panel on the right-hand side. So some of the areas that we've got that you could go into doing different areas to bring in some extra cash. We've talked about the different LGVs. UK familiarisation. We were just talking off air a little bit about UK familiarisation. And Nick, I think you were saying you'd done some of the UK familiarisation. If you want to just sort of talk a little bit about what that is, because that might be one that people don't know a lot about.
Yeah, UK familiarisation, where people come into the country often for employment, and they either might get a company car or access to driving a vehicle over here, and of course may have never driven on what I always say to them is the correct side of the road. And they need to have their driving assessment skills done. Now, if it's for a company, it's a bit like fleet. You probably would also need to write up a report. Then you've got some hard evidence to show what they've done and their progress. We would always write up a report. So it would be like a marking sheet as they go round, and then a written report at the end by whatever trainer did the training. We found it very lucrative to do that. We used to send 4 cars down to this company and spend the most of the day down there with the vehicles. And then sadly, sometimes we'd have to say to people that your driving skills are not to the standard required for driving on British roads with other people in the car. You might drive yourself around like that, but we have a responsibility to make sure you're safe with the client or whoever it is you're driving around. So it's a good market to get into. The people we were looking at were qualified nurses, and they were coming from abroad to do live-in care with access to vehicles.
Yeah, lovely. And have you done any work on that side, James, or not?
Not as a regular kind of contract like that, but it is something that I've offered and had some people take it up. I think one of the things to be aware of if you're trying to diversify is that people may be looking for something, and unless you're actually specifying that you provide it, they could look elsewhere. So my thinking is that if you've got a website, put details of anything that you're able to offer on it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to look for someone that is going to say UK familiarisation lessons or whatever else it is they want.
Yeah, and that's
one of the things.
Go on,
sorry, Ed. One of the things down there, you've got new car familiarisation. I've done quite a few of those, and if you get in with your car dealership, I mean, we used to buy a lot of Nissans. Neil, you used to have a lot of Nissan Micras as well yourself, didn't you? And
Yep.
so if you get in with the dealership and say, look, if there's people who want to know what the car's like, because you only let them use the car for a little spin around the block or for half a day, then send them to us and they can drive one of their cars, plus they can get an assessment at the same time. So that's another area, but of course you've got to approach the car dealer and you run the same car. We're fortunate, we have a variety of cars, so therefore we can go with about 3 different dealers.
Good.
Yeah. Neil, when you went into the LGV side, did you have a background in the LGV, or was it just something that you found interesting, or do you think it's something that you need to have a background in the area that you're going to go into?
I knew absolutely nothing about LGV. So when I had slack times, and that was in the early side when I started my business, I thought I need to know all about every license there is. So this is why I then went and done an LGV course with one of my competitors. I then realised that it's no good me trying to start an LGV school up unless I had somebody who knew a little bit about it. And I happened to bump into a chap one day and said to him, hey, I can teach you to become an instructor if you can teach me a little bit knowledge about the LGV side of it. And that's how we formed a partnership with another guy, and that must have been 40 years ago, probably 35, 40 years ago. And that lasted well until we had the recession in the late 80s. Was it late 80s? No, late. I can't remember now. The mind has gone dead. Anyhow, we then parted company, and then I knew enough knowledge to do it on my own and to take on instructors on my own.
Yeah.
But I still know very little about it, believe you me. This is why they have these regular CPC courses, which we now run.
Yeah, that's been another area just lately that's coming. Was it in the last 5 or 6 years? Is it about 6 years it's been in now, the CPC?
Yep, that's right. About 5 or 6 years. Yep.
Yeah. And
another one is the taxi test preparation, and I mean that's quite a simple job. If you go down to a taxi rank about 11 o'clock at night and find all the illegal taxi drivers and just put the car through the door and say, no, I don't want to lift, I don't want to tax anyone. But when you get DVSA say, or your local council say you need to be checked, then I'm the person to do it for you. So I've done a few. Again, you need to understand how the taxi test can be different, and of course whether the taxi that they're using carries a person with disabilities, because that changes the dynamics of the actual taxi test. And
is
there
that not
are
a separate test as well, Nick? Is there a separate part to the taxi test with where you have to use the disability ramps? There's a driving test for driving, and then is there not another test for using the disability ramps?
Yes, yeah, yes, there is.
Yeah.
And of course the marking system, very similar normal marking system as an L test, but it's only 9 faults that they can accumulate. So and a lot of people do turn up, especially in our area, for taxi tests and fail quite miserably. So it's another area to look at.
Yeah, in our area, most of that is done by the council. They do it in-house.
Yes, some do, but then again, you could approach the council and see if there's an opportunity, an opening there.
Yeah. They might want the council tax bill paid as well.
Yeah. Have any of you done anything to do with the eco-driving courses or advanced driving? I know, James, you said you've done the advanced driving examiners one, so presumably you had to go through the advanced driving stage to do that.
Sorry, you were breaking up, Ed. I couldn't hear what you said.
Okay, right. The advanced driving and eco-driving, you've done the advanced examiners course? So I take it you've had to do the advanced driving course to get to that level.
Yeah, I mean, I've done at various times. I've taken all the advanced driving tests that I could find. So I've taken the IAM, the ROSPA test, Diamond test, and Cardington test. I'm an examiner for Diamond, so I got that by way of the diploma in driving instruction, and at the time the Cardington test. But you don't have to do that to necessarily train people to an advanced standard. From a legal point of view, any ADI is allowed to train to that standard, but if you're going to do it, you probably want to take at least one of the tests beforehand so that you got a little bit of an idea about what's involved.
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree there, James, because there's quite a lot of difference between an eco driving course and an advanced driving course if you're doing it properly, because the eco bit goes straight out the window.
Yeah.
Eco driving, I mean, when they first talked about that with DVSA, ADI and JC were one of the first people to go down to Cardington to join DSA as it was then, and run the cars with these monitors on to see how fuel efficient we were driving before it was introduced into the driving test. So yes, I do that. Show
Did that used
pupils
to be
eco
safe?
driving.
Did that used to be SafeEd? The driving course for the eco driving, or was that to do with the vans?
SafeEd was vans.
SafeEd was vans, was
Vans,
it?
yeah. But yes, I'd have to concur with James. If you were going to go into advanced driving or defensive driving, I think you'd have to do it yourself and pass the test. Otherwise, you would probably be working possibly a little bit in the dark, because even ADIs that I've trained and prepared are quite amazed the difference between what would be termed as an advanced driving test over a Part 2 test.
Yeah.
So there's
not
a lot of they're not really the same.
No, I've found that. I've done the IAM one and the ROSPA. I've done my masters in the IAM as well, and it's very different driving. Like you say, eco driving just doesn't come into some of the advanced techniques of driving. So there is that big difference between those two.
But I think that's good. That as a driver, you should be able to switch that on and off.
Yeah.
So you could be able to do an advanced driver style, but you could also switch that off and do eco driving and be just as skillful at both.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
And something that a lot of the councils are doing, they are up in our neck of the woods. The North Yorkshire County Council are doing this older driver assessments. I don't know if that's all over the country. Do you have it down your way, Nick, for doing the older driver assessments? No, not familiar with it. James, do you have it around the Midlands?
Not that I'm aware of. I know some councils do it, but none of them around here that I know of.
Yeah, and that's something, if you want to get into, in our area, to get into the older driver assessments, is to contact your local road safety officer. For ours in North Yorkshire, we contact them, although the City of York run their own as well, because we have the inner city of York have their own council separate to North Yorkshire. So you've got to be careful that you go into the correct areas to actually deal with the correct people as to where you want to do the training, and then put the assessments into the right areas as well, because some people will fall into different counters as well. And I know with ours, if you're in the city of York, you can't claim to do it with North Yorkshire. So if you're looking into that sort of thing, the local road safety officer is the best person to approach there.
I'm automatically qualified for that.
Sorry, Nick.
I just said I'm automatically qualified to do that because of my age.
Yeah, Nick, we're going to come in.
The AA runs some courses, I believe, and one of their directors or somebody was on the radio the other day saying how lucrative it was for them and how much profit they made out of it, which is what you're in business for. But yes, so don't be fearful that there's a large company offering this service if you can provide the service and you're just as good as the next person.
Yeah, can I just tell you a little story here, Ed, about a guy who phoned me up and said he was concerned about his elderly father's driving. And I said, well, what are you concerned about? He said, well, the last time he drove his car, he drove it out the garage with the door shut. Garage door was shut.
Oh dear.
and then the hardest part is to tell an elderly driver to hang their keys up and to stop driving. That is very, very difficult.
What would you say is the best approach for that then, Neil? Family discussion, or to do it privately with the individual, or get the family
do it privately with the individual?
The
way I normally do it, the way I done it was to say, you've had a lot of good years. Why break that now? Go away peacefully. Let somebody else drive you around. You've earned it.
Yeah.
Yes, I've had to do the same thing, and the family actually told the old chap that his car's MOT, it had failed its MOT, and it hadn't, but they just put the frighteners on him so he wouldn't touch it. Um, and one of the reasons that they did that is he'd pulled out at a junction and collided with another vehicle, and the police said, we'll either prosecute you or you need a driver assessment to decide whether you should hang the keys up. And unfortunately, the person that he'd pulled out in front of and collided with was a police car.
Yeah.
Nothing serious.
Yes, I'd probably, by the time we'd done less than quarter of a mile, I'd decided that he wasn't, unfortunately, fit to drive. And as you say, Neil, you can have the conversation privately, but the family were heavily involved in this at the time, and they were pleased and relieved that I'd said, look, the day has come to hang the keys up. And they said, look, we'll take it from here, and we'll explain the situation to him. And so they didn't need me to go into a great deal of detail other than to explain and just reflect on what we'd actually done on that particular session. So I have done a few. Then there was an elderly lady. She was on the first parts of dementia, and they said, you're all right going from one place A to B that you know, but if there was a diversion or the road was closed or you went somewhere else, your driving skills, you just cannot, it's too complicated for you now. So she was fine driving from one place to another, but some complicated roundabouts that she'd never seen before, she really couldn't handle. So, and she had to have, I prepared her for a proper assessment, but unfortunately, I did say to her, look, I don't think it's going to be successful because you're not familiar with the roads. You know, she was
On the other hand, yeah, sorry, Nick. On the other hand, I did take an elderly person out who was in her 80s, and for 45 minutes, I never writ one single minor mistake down. I had to more or less invent one, and that to say that she was travelling at 67 instead of 70 on a 70-mile-an-hour stretch. So you can get the good ones as well as the bad ones.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes they come to you though because they know they're bad or they know they really ought to be hanging up the keys and they want confirmation. Although I did get one guy his driving license back and he'd had his license removed because he'd had an operation, and because during the operation he'd had a seizure, they took his license off him, and he fought tooth and nail to get it back, and I took him out and I said there's nothing wrong with the driving, got his license back for him, and he has since driven to Spain and Portugal, and last year he went and drove to Prague without any mishap whatsoever. Yeah. So it can be done. So the work is there, it's knowing where to tap into it. Again, I go back to where I first started and saying belonging to different local associations, national associations, that's where a lot of your networking can come from. And like talking like we are today, you've got good support of people who have a wealth of knowledge within the industry and that can give guidance and point you in the right direction for these things.
What Nick has just said, I can turn around with hand on my heart and say, quite honestly, my business grew because I belonged to national associations where I networked with other guys, tapped into their brains, and used it in my own business. So it does pay to belong to an association somewhere along the line.
Well, I can vouch for that because since I've joined the ADI and JC, I've started doing this. So this has broadened my range, and I've also joined with the training team to do the new coaching course that's been delivered last week that we've delivered for the first time, and I've been on the standards check training courses as well and helped do those. So that's broadened my field out as well. And if you're somebody like myself who likes doing public speaking and likes talking to groups of people, it's a fantastic opportunity to get involved with the larger organisations that can really support you and help you along and put some trust in you. That's one thing that I could say from joining this team, is that the trust that's been instilled in me is phenomenal. And to say, yeah, just come on, yeah, let's do it and push things forward. So it's been great.
Well done. Well done.
So
have we got any questions yet?
well, I've asked one or two of the questions as we've come through. We've not got that many coming through, so hopefully everybody's able to find where they can type in the questions. I'll just go through the control panel a little bit for everybody. On the right-hand side, as you're looking at your control panel, there'll be a blue screen and it'll say a questions box. You have to hit the tab at the side of it. There's some little arrows, and if you hit the tab, open the box up, and then you can type your question in. If you've got any questions and you want to ask anything, fire away. So keep the questions coming in, and we'll ask them as we go along. So,
looking on our list,
yeah,
has any of our panelists and our audience, that is, think of anything that we haven't got on the list? One of the things I do, believe it or not, from time to time, is help driving instructors either when they change vehicles or they just lose confidence in the actual job. They're already fully qualified ADIs, not necessarily preparing for a standards check, but occasionally I do help ADIs just raise their game a little bit. I think it's nice that they've got the confidence themselves to come to another ADI and ask for that assistance, and I'm more than willing to help. And again, it comes back to imparting knowledge. As Neil has said, my knowledge in this job has expanded because of belonging to the ADI and JC, and I don't think I would have expanded it if I was just Joe Bloggs on my own.
Yeah.
Even Nick Ibbott on my own, for that matter.
Yeah, one of the things I've found is it's good to use some of the forums that are out there just to see what's going on and get different points of view and see how many different points of view there are, because everybody's got a different way of looking at something, and sometimes you learn something from some of them, and then there's other times when people say something and you think that not quite interested in that piece of information. So you can use some of these things for filtering things out, and you can use them as sounding boards when you go to the meetings, like you're saying, Nick. And I found it useful to say, I've heard about this. What's your take on it? So, because like you said earlier on, I think somebody on the panel said that it's quite an insular sort of profession to be in, isn't it? You're very isolated, and sometimes you can feel on your own. So it's good to get to other meetings, and even just some of the forums that are on Facebook and what have you.
Yeah. I think, again, if you go to local meetings, not necessarily just local meetings, but you'll have other speakers there. I mean, we recently had one from the DVSA talking about the new trial that the DVSA are doing, and he came down and spoke to us. And I think it's good that you have that networking and get that relationship going with DVSA, because at least then you've got some allies. We can't beat them over the head all the time. They're not all bad guys. Even if they do go on strike.
Yeah. We'll see how that affects my trailer test tomorrow. Yeah.
We had one cancelled yesterday.
Yeah, you had one. Yeah. I think they've been over the different parts of the country, haven't they? They've staggered these ones. So just looking at this list down here, have any of the panel done any snow or ice driving lessons?
I love it, but we don't get enough snow and ice down in my neck of the woods. But I have never, in all 32 years of being a driving instructor, not gone out regardless of the weather. And I do appreciate maybe in Yorkshire, more exposed parts of the country where you are, further north still, yes, there's snow drifts. It could be quite dangerous. But I'm fortunate living in a city environment, probably the same as James, where we don't really get that bad of weather. But yes, I love driving in ice and snow and teach people how to do it properly. And ironically, probably the person that I taught to drive and was most impressed with driving in ice and snow was my other half. That's only because she comes from Russia, Siberia, and she just took to the snow and ice like it was just natural. In fact, she was saying to me, "Where is the snow?"
Yeah.
She was expecting to dig the car out.
Clear roads.
So I am often appalled that people, and even instructors, won't go out in it. I think, well, as I say, yeah, there's parts of the country, but I think you've got to use a bit of common sense and look outside and say, yes, you've got to have the confidence to do it. But again, it comes with a skill. Do you understand? Do people understand how to drive in those conditions?
Yeah. Yeah. Neil, did you say you have an airfield for doing the LGV? Is it big enough to use as skid pan area or not? Or do you take people
No,
out?
it's not big enough to use as a skid pan area. We tried skid pan driving many years ago, and it was a lot of money to do skid pan training, an awful lot of money. But like Nick, what I used to do was to take them when the snow and ice was right, go along a certain road. I would jam the brake on and then see what their reactions were like. Everything was controlled. There was never no danger. But if you had the opportunity, it was great to use the environment at that particular time because, as Nick said, it doesn't come very often. So use it if it's there. Don't be frightened to get out amongst it.
I've actually had people who were quite nervous to go out, but actually when we'd gone out there and we'd explored things and people had got that feeling of driving on the ice and snow, they soon settle down. And it's that first few minutes of where they've got that bit of tension. So one of the best things I've found is to get them to just very gently lock the car up, brake hard, feel what it feels like to get the car sliding, and then release the brake and see how the traction comes back again after you've released the brake. And by the time you've done that a few times, people seem to be quite happy to drive on the snow and ice. So I've found that quite a useful way.
It's the same as getting them to over accelerate, spin the wheels on the back.
Yeah.
Over acceleration, over steering, over braking, all these things you can teach when the weather condition is bad.
Yeah.
I can remember one year we went out, it was about 7 o'clock at night, and we came back. My pupil, like you say, Ed, he was a bit concerned about driving in the conditions. He came back and he said, "That is the best driving lesson I've ever had." I said, what did you like? He goes, "Well, there was no other cars on the road. We only met 3 cars." He said, "But what you taught me and how the car behaves and how much more gentle I have to be with the steering input and releasing of the clutch." I said, and that's dexterity, and that's what's the hallmark of a good driver: smoothness. Speed isn't. Anybody can drive fast. It's how smooth you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there are driving instructors, rightly or wrongly, I don't know whether I should criticise them, that won't do or conduct lessons in the snow and ice.
No.
And I think, well, I don't think you do it. I think you're doing a disservice. But then I reflect on that and think, well, how good are their own driving skills? You know, shoot me down if you want, but that's my personal view.
It is a question, isn't it? Yeah. So, anything else on the snow or ice driving? Anybody got anything to say, James? Have you anything to add to that?
I just concur with what's already been said. That the difficulty often is getting the conditions.
Yeah.
We'll all have to move up to Yorkshire.
We struggle sometimes because, like Nick said, we have some roads around here have got quite a high hedge or banking, and then we get the snowdrifts. So sometimes we can't get out because we're blocked in. But that's rare occurrence where we actually go to that extreme of getting blocked in. So we try and make the most of it and get out there as soon as possible when the roads have been cleared. One of the interesting things that I find that is on here that I don't personally get that much of a chance to get into the really big cities, and something I'd like to sort of ask James, because I know you're near Birmingham and Nick, you're near London. How do you ever take people right into the heart of those major cities, and do you take learners in there? How do you get on with like the big major cities? Because we've got Leeds near us, but I've driven around London and Birmingham, and that seems a lot more intense around those areas. So how do you find getting people, especially other learners, to deal with that sort of thing?
I think it's a case of when they build them up to it, but when they're ready, then take them in. And again, you can take them around the ring road, maybe initially just going straight ahead at all the roundabouts, and you gradually build it up until you make it harder. So you can find the easy route through the city centre, and then the slightly harder, and then the harder again. But what it does is that it means that they feel confident driving in that area, but when they come back out to the suburbs, everything is just so much easier and their confidence has grown. So I'd recommend it.
Yeah. I can't let my students do the ring road around London because it's a motorway called the M25.
You wouldn't
We
want to
have
go on there. You'll spend
I
happy
do
time
take my,
stationary.
I do take my students into London, but of course we have to be very careful and wary of where the congestion charge is because that's pretty expensive, and I don't want to get caught up in that. I haven't made the mistake before now and turned into it and thought, oh well, here we go. But yes, and certainly on my Pass Plus, we're fortunate enough to go into parts of London. And yeah, well, unfortunately, earlier this year, my son was ill in hospital. He was in hospital for nearly 3 months. And I used to say to certain students, how would you like a little trip down to Brompton Hospital? You can drive there, we'll have an hour there while I'll visit my son, and we'll buy you a coffee, and then you can come back. If you've got the time, we'll only charge you for the hours you're sitting behind the wheel. And nobody said no. So, and it was, and they, amazing. One girl, she just thought it was absolutely amazing. I would have to say, if you're driving in an intercity, especially like London and probably Birmingham and St James, you do need to know your way around. You
Yes.
cannot get yourself in the wrong lane because they'll take no prisoners. These rush hour drivers and these, well, London drivers, it's just a different ball game altogether. There aren't any rules.
Yeah, I
One of
found
the
that quite
interesting things, though,
difficult when I was down. I did some training for the Olympics for the Olympic drivers, and I found that I spent some time just going out there and learning some of the routes that we drove on because if you were in the wrong lane, like you said, Nick, it was just an absolute nightmare. And this was with qualified drivers. Okay, some of them were driving BMWs, which were manuals, and people had been used to automatics. So we were having to get some vehicle familiarization in there. But it did seem really hard work sometimes that if you soon got a wrong lane, that was it, especially at the wrong time of day.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things, though, is actually getting learners to appreciate that if they're driving in a city they don't know, there is a good chance at some point they will be in the wrong lane and will go the wrong way, and don't be scared of that. But it does definitely
Yeah.
help if we know our way around.
Unless, of course, you're going the wrong way down a one-way street, and then I would be worried.
Yes,
But
I think
yes,
you'd
you're
be good
right.
about that as well.
And that's part of driving is to not be worried that if you do find yourself going in the wrong direction to what you hoped, that take away the stress and the worry about that. And that's part of, as instructors, what we should be coaching and encouraging our students to do. That's part of client-centered learning, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So something to think about because it's 8:45 now. We've been on air for 3/4 of an hour, so I think we'll just start to wrap this one up a little bit and think about how you've maybe decided to go into these different areas. Maybe something we might look at next time is how to go about marketing these sort of things and different marketing techniques that people could use to get into different areas. Do you think that would follow on quite nicely, guys?
Yeah, I would say so.
Has
Yeah.
anybody got any questions before we move on to wrap this one up? We'll just see if there's any final questions come in. But thank you, James, Neil, and Nick, for attending as the panelists tonight and talking about your experiences. And hopefully, everybody out there has got some information to go away with and think about whether they go into diversification. And maybe we'll follow that up with some marketing techniques and some personal growth areas as to how to manage their marketing. The next webinar will be in January. And just bring my calendar up because we want the last Tuesday in January. And the last Tuesday in January will be January the 29th. We will look at.
It's not.
Hang on. Is it? No, it's not.
No, it's not. That's not. You.
No.
No.
Oh, is that December?
26th.
That's not it. That's it. Right.
You got 2015 there. That's better.
That's 2016.
That's the
Tuesday the
wife's birthday
26th.
on that date, so I.
Right. Tuesday the 26th of January when we get the right
Thank
calendar
you.
date. Yeah. Tuesday the 26th.
You'd get me divorced.
We don't want that. Thanks for spotting that, guys. So Tuesday the 26th of January for the next webinar. And that one will be starting at 8 o'clock. and I think there'll be Lynn, myself, and we'll see if anybody else wants to join us on that night. And I think we'll look at coaching part 2. We'll come up with a subject for coaching on that one, and then the marketing one to follow on from this one with Nick and James will be the month after that in February, and the February one will be Tuesday the 23rd, Nick and James, if you want to put that one in your diary.
Yep, I've written it down.
Lovely. And then if any of you want to join Lynn and myself for the next one on coaching, feel welcome. So thank you very much for everybody that's attended this evening. We've no questions come in. So we'll say good night from all of us, and thank you for listening. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.